And so they said action, and I ran up to that bus and I threw myself at it, and I ended up going through a double pane bus
Oh,
window
jeez.
and like just shattering it. And I was like so in it. I was like ripping out glass with my hands.
Jeez. Hi, and welcome to the Story, a podcast where storytellers disrupt. I'm David Noroña.
And I'm Fabiano Altamura.
And before we dive in with our very special guest, please remember to like, download, follow, and give us that 5-star review.
And today we've got the amazing honor of having Matthew Blade on. Super excited. Matt, so good to have you, dude.
It's really good to be here with you guys. I miss you guys.
We miss you too, bro. And Matt literally did all 3 years with us. Mm-hmm. Amazing student, like literally one of the hardest working people I've seen.
100%.
And then he leaves school, gets signed by an amazing agent, which is the dream, right? Zero Gravity. Shout out to Iona McLean. And then the first movie he gets is with Jeremy Piven and Terrence Howard, called The Walk. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it. And then he's done another 3 movies since, and now he's just wrapped on a movie, haven't you, Matt?
Yeah. We wrapped last Wednesday. Was it last Wednesday? Yeah, last Wednesday. So
unbelievable. Nice. I mean, that was not exactly my journey after conservatory. Here was my story after conservatory, because this is not the normal story. If you're not an actor, typically what you do is you struggle, you hope to get an agent, maybe you do. Mm-hmm. So it's not always an immediate thing. And then, usually there's some silence as you knock around like a piñata in Los Angeles, trying to figure out where your first job is going to be. I mean, when I landed in New York, man, I don't know what your experience in London was. I was in a gig, but it actually closed the week that it opened. What's your post-conservatory story?
It took me 3 months to get my first tour.
Yeah, it's normal.
So I got an agent straight out, but he was an idiot. And then God rest his soul. And then I got my first tour in November, 3 months. And then I think I had another 6 months off, then got my other #1 tour after that.
These are all positive stories. Matt, let me ask you something, man. You have a very beautiful and unusual journey towards acting. It certainly wasn't maybe the typical one. You weren't taking tap classes and, singing music theater, in 3rd grade. Talk to us a little bit about how you came to the Bethel Conservatory of the Arts and how the Lord led you to acting.
Yeah, it's a really long story. I'll try to summarize it. I essentially, where it began, if I can trace it back, was I was living in Mississippi at the time, and I came out to help out at this place I've worked for a long time called JH Ranch. I was going to help out at one of their summer programs. And I actually came down to Bethel while I was out there at this ranch that happens to be close to Redding. And I went to a worship service, and in this worship service, I heard God speak to me and say, "You have a fear around your vocation." Because at the time I was in college in Mississippi, pursuing a finance degree, looking to kind of go the finance business route. And I realized that was actually a plan B, is what it was, because I knew God at the time, and I wanted to live my life all out for him. But I had this little if God doesn't come through, boom, I will fall back on my plan B. And what ended up happening was I surrendered that to the Lord, and he led me out to this ranch to work full time out there. And this is up north of Redding. And I had a lot of time out there alone. I was up in the mountains for some parts of the season by myself, 45 minutes away from a grocery store. And I was just kind of alone in this big house that my company had available. And I told myself while I was there that I wasn't going to watch movies the whole time. I watched movies, but I was like, I'm actually going to dive into what God has for me up here. And it was in that season that I heard God speak to me and say, acting. Now that was like one of the craziest things I've ever heard God say, because I considered myself probably the last person who should have been an actor. Like, I had so much fear growing up, social anxiety. One of my earliest memories is me at a speech pathologist as a young little boy. I couldn't have been like, 4 years old. I just remember this image of me working with a speech pathologist because I had speech issues, specifically a stutter. So I was really shy, really quiet, and just hated being in front of people. So I think it's God's sense of humor that I'm an actor today, to make me, of all people, as I feel. I still am like, wow, this is just crazy that God's made me an actor. But that was kind of my journey. And so in that process, I decided to apply to BCA, where I auditioned and I met Fab. David, I had known you before then. We had been on a mission.
We had some history. We had some history. We're gonna tease the audience with maybe the theme, maybe the theme for Matt's episode is strange and beautiful.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things, indeed. So we're gonna come back to how you and I met. So you come up to the doors. Do you remember the audition, or do you remember what that moment of auditioning for BCA was?
I remember.
You remember it
very, very well.
I want to hear your version. What was your version?
I just remember seeing this guy. There was something super special on him.
Yeah.
I just remember saying, we've got to have this guy.
What about him? Because this is an interesting thing, I think, for artists. When you walk into a room, we don't always know how we're perceived. And sometimes we think how whatever we're thinking in our head is how other people see us, which is usually not the case. What do you remember about Matt?
And I remember, a spirit-filled believers is different, right? Because we see something way past just the way somebody enters a room.
Fair enough.
I just remember Matt. I just remember his accent, being all right. And I just,
well, he is a good Southern boy.
Yeah. And I just remember him. He felt like a movie star. To me, I just could feel that in him. And that's not saying that now because he's working and stuff, but it's like, I always felt that in Matt.
I think what I appreciate about Matt, and I think this gives me an opportunity to share something, because there's probably people out there who think, oh, I don't tap dance, or I'm not an extrovert, or I'm not the life of the party. And I'm not saying Matt isn't, because he's a lovely guy. He's definitely a guy you want to sit, and chat with at a party. But I think sometimes we think that actors are all razzmatazz and loud and life of the party. I mean, that's definitely one part of the species.
Yeah.
I often find that some of the best actors are either introverted or very reflective and thoughtful.
Are you describing yourself here, David?
Cuban.
No, I'm joking. One of the best actors I know is I'm talking about myself here right now.
Oh, surprise. No. Because I was at a doctor's office once and I saw Joaquin Phoenix come in, and he's not an extrovert at all. And yet he does really lovely work. Or you think about like Anthony Hopkins. I'm not, listen, I think great actors come in all shades. Right. Matt, what was your version of the story? So you walk into this room already just following God, not really knowing why you're in this room, maybe fully. What do you recall, if you recall that moment?
Well, one of the things that stuck out to me was I remember having, because in the audition process, I think we had to present 2 monologues. And I remember having to Google what a monologue was. Like, that's how green I was. Like, I was like, okay, we have to do a monologue. Like,
Kylie Minogue? Do I have to do 2 Kylie Minogues?
And so it was just, and I remember like just being so nervous, like just, but I think for BCA, since I was working away, I had to do a video audition. And so I remember like doing the best I could, and the fact of like, I was like, well, I know I need to like look up stuff and like figure out what I should, like what this character should want. And it was just like,
Fab has a very quizzical look on his face, because I think he remembers you walking into the room. But can I tell you real quick, I remember, because you and I had history, which we'll get to, that I was actually on the soccer field. I think we may have both been on the soccer field because our boys were on the same team. And Matt called me and said, hey man, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?
Did we not? So you didn't come in person then?
I think he might have been at the ranch, right? Were you at the ranch or at home?
David, my memory is that you called me.
Okay. Yeah, that's possible.
You called, like, because I auditioned, and then I was out with my friend, and I got a call from like an LA number, and I picked up, and it was you, and we hadn't talked in like, 6-7 years.
Oh,
and you said you had just watched my tape, and I didn't answer. I was like a little nervous. I was like, man, I really hope I get in, because I really wanted to get in. And so that was my memory. But honestly, that stuff has like it seems it wasn't long ago, but
I was convinced I saw you in person, but it must be wrong then. But if it was the self tape that he sent you, then everything I said prior is confirming what was on the self tape.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think whether somebody walks in the room, and I think that also probably speaks to the quality of his tape when he came in. I mean, what I know about, I think this is what makes Matt a great actor is he's honest.
Mm-hmm.
He's honest to the core.
Yeah.
And he's just not one of those guys that ever lies. So no matter what he's giving you, he's giving you the honest truth from where he's at.
He's a very giving actor. So Matt, talk us through then. How's your journey been since you left school? Because I know there's been tons of stuff, and yours is not necessarily the typical journey. I think everybody's journey is very, very different. But talk us through, like, you left school, you got, actually, it was very interesting because you didn't actually leave. You got an agent before you left, right?
Yeah. I ended up signing on with Zero Gravity with Iona in my senior year.
And then what happened from there?
I moved down to LA, graduated, moved down to LA, and I think 2 weeks after I graduated, I ended up booking that film called The Walk, and I was on set, and like 2 weeks after that, and I was just hanging on for dear life. I remember some of the prayers I was sending up during that time were just like SOS emergency prayers of, where am I? How? Like, cause it's weird. Like, I started this acting journey, and literally it was me going, okay, God, yes, you have my yes, I'll follow you. And I found myself on this movie set, and I'm just going, how did I get here? This is crazy. I felt so inadequate. And it brought out so much stuff, it brought out so much stuff in my own personal life. And, in this process, I guess, especially since moving to LA, I've just fallen in love with acting, like it's just the most fulfilling thing. But it has been a crazy wild ride full of very high highs. Like, when you book something and when you're on set, it's like, I mean, life is good, and even after it, it's like, man, this is awesome. Like, I've been validated.
Mm-hmm.
But as we all know, as actors, there's plenty of times, like, I had, after I booked The Walk, I went on a journey where I ended up moving back to Mississippi. That's a whole nother story, and went to it was tough. I had to face some things that I hadn't faced my whole life, but I had to do it. And it was acting that gave me the courage to face this stuff. And anyway, I ended up moving back to LA. That's a whole nother story that maybe for another time, but just know it was full of high highs. Like, and I feel like that's what this artistic journey is. It's full of high highs. And then there's the lows, and they're both important. That's what I've taken from a lot of it. This is like, man, they're both necessary, and it's all part of the artistic journey. And they're both valuable. And in fact, the lows are what I like, or where I have the gold from,
Wow.
And like lean on, and that like make the times when I like, when I'm on set, like this past month, I was on set, and the lows that I had before that made me value those moments. I was on set going, I'm going to soak this in, as if it was every time they said action. I was like, every single time, this might be my last time to act.
I love that.
And I'm gonna tell the truth the best I can and give my whole heart on every single one.
Do you know why do you know why I love that, Matt? Is because there's no entitlement there. Do you know what I used to do? I used to hate auditioning. Then I started to love auditioning because I realized it was the only time I got to perform. Yeah. And then I started to thank the Lord for it. And I love that you say that, Matt. And I love you say there are goals in the lows, because the thing is, that adage that we're told in the industry, you're only as good as the last job, the last star you work with, the quality of material, whatever that may be.
Right.
That's not the truth, because we find our identity in the highs and the lows, and it's the journey. Right. It's not the destination, right?
Yeah. And I often think, and I've shared this before, but I had a realization in college where it was like, okay, if I'm miserable when I'm auditioning, if I'm miserable and scared when I'm rehearsing, then I'm scared on set or on stage, and then after I don't have the gig, I'm miserable again. Yeah. When on earth am I ever going to be content and happy?
Or why the heck am I an actor?
Or why am I doing this? Right, exactly. Matt, I'm so curious. You said something that's, I'm sure, true, but I think unusual, and that is that you found the gold in the low point. I'm curious why, and what did you find?
So long story short, in this process of acting, I've had to, it's weird. You have to let go of certain things. Like
what?
Like, honestly, the guy I train with now, he calls it product, the booking, the affirmation, the validation that comes from the business side of the industry that we're in. All, they're important, they're worth looking at. But as an artist, those can't be our focus. If they are, they actually are the opposite of an artistic expression. And that was one question that I had to ask myself, and I really asked myself, which was, Matthew, who do you need yourself to be? Because who I need myself to be, if I need myself to be a good actor, then I'm not expressing anything original or artistically. I'm actually just trying to be liked or be good or have this resume. When true artistic expression isn't concerned with what other people think. It's an expression and it's a gift. And I think that's what I've come to realize is the joy in that. The joy in letting go of I gotta be this thing. I gotta be, a series regular. I gotta book this film. Because what happens is if we don't book it, all of a sudden we have this crash. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I wish I would have had that realization way earlier. I know for me, I think the reason why I ended up here in this northern mountain town was because those very things that Matt's talking about had, I think, squeezed the joy and the life out of the very thing that caused me to pursue it. The love, the beauty, the artistry of acting. Yeah. I just recently read this little short script, and I typically wouldn't pay attention to this, but for some reason, I felt like the Lord had highlighted it. It's just a local short film commercial thing, and there was just something about it that was on it. And I read it, and I found myself being moved, and then I found myself kind of going, I didn't expect me to be moved by this, and I just felt like I don't really care about the money. I don't really care about anything. And then I sent it over to my manager, thinking, "Oh my gosh, here, let me get ready for this," because he's going to be like, "Why on earth are you wasting your time doing this?" Well, it actually deals with the hard of hearing in the deaf community. And I had forgotten, check this out, that my manager, his mother was deaf.
Oh, wow.
So when he read it, he was moved as well. And suddenly I felt like, for the first time in a long time, not that we've ever been at odds because, Howard and I are partners, but I felt like we had both our hearts had been drawn to something. And man, I have to just tell you that after 30 years in the business, that is rare and unusual. Typically, we are drawn to by the number of zeros on the potential contract.
Which I think in some ways takes, I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm saying we don't get into the business of acting and creating for the money initially, right?
No.
We get into it because the love of storytelling and the love of wanting to communicate, I don't know, what's on God's heart, or just because we love the freaking craft.
It's like your wife. You certainly don't get into the relationship or the business of life, raising kids and doing things, and the partnership of marriage is a reality, right? But that's not why I asked my girl out.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's not why I fell in love with acting. Man, I'm curious, man, what do you think acting represents? What is its meaning? What is its power, its superpower? What does it do unlike any other craft or art form?
Oh, man. That's such a great question, and also an impossible answer, I feel. But I'll do my best to answer it.
Yeah.
As a viewer of of story and actors, like as an audience member, it reminds us of, why we wake up in the morning, why we breathe, why we're doing this thing. It helps us connect with those around. Honestly, I feel like what potentially it may be at its core is the truth. Mm. And it's so ironic because when most people think of actors, they think of pretenders, right? Mm-hmm. Like these are just pretenders, people who fake stuff. I've found in my journey that acting is the opposite. Acting is about the truth. It's about letting a scenario or circumstance, the truth of that, live in my heart. Mm-hmm. And versus like doing an imitation or some sort of like pretend. And I mean, that's actually what Stanislavski, not to get like acting theory, but like Stanislavski says, acting is not pretending. It's not.
Yes.
That's at its core. It's not. Acting is, it's like a medium to where we can connect, and that's my hope for. I think that's what, goes into this impossible definition of what art is. It's like my hope is that the truth would connect us. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I feel like that's such a good question, but I feel like we'll also be unraveling that question for a long time.
For a long time, right? I think acting is a mirror, right? Mm. It mirrors, or should in some way mirror, humanity, in the sense that as professional storytellers, we embody people in different situations that not everybody can relate to, but people can. And we put up a mirror and go, this is what humanity is like in different circumstances, right? So people get the experience, the people can experience seeing what somebody would do in different scenarios without having to go through it themselves, I think.
Yeah, I think it gives us a window into experiences, right?
Yeah.
But I love these words. The words, I want to just throw them out there because I think it's just beautiful. I love conversations like this. It's about humanity. It's about being human. Yeah. It's about reflecting humanity. N.T. Wright talks, he has this beautiful expression that I love repeating as often as I can. He says, if I told you that my love was a rose, would I be lying to you because I was speaking poetry? Or would I be calling out and revealing a higher truth of the one that I love? If I say to my wife, hey, I love you, but if I say to her, hey, you're a rose, or you're my rose, or some other beautiful sense of poetry, or one of, Shakespeare's sonnets or something like this.
Totally.
Right. You look at a sonnet and you go, it's funny. We had an interview today with, in one of our screenwriting courses, with Sean Gaffney, he's a professor at Asbury of story.
Asbury,
yes, and he talked about the rival. Yeah. He gave us some. He gave us some perspective from the ground. Another conversation for another day. But he was talking about how the church needs to get better at understanding story, because oftentimes we're so reductionist and simplistic that this is why we have two-dimensional characters that don't struggle with 90% of what's in Scripture, which is a topic that you and I have talked about a little bit. Matt, other than truth and connection, I guess looking forward, as you look forward to your career, and I know you're a young guy, you're just starting out, but I'm curious, man, where do you see the Lord leading you? Like, what do you think kinds of characters does he want you to play and stories, that he wants you to tell?
Oh, I mean, I know personally I want to play them all. But I do love, like, I'm in a class right now with a guy named Doug Tompos, and just want to make sure I give him a shout out because he's such a great communicator when it comes to what this thing is that we do. But we've been able to open up some stories, like some of the classic plays. And I've just really loved, like, I guess maybe back to the word that you said, David, the humanity of these characters, that there's no way to define them. There's no way to, they're not one way. And it's kind of like what you were talking about, the two-dimensional. They're human, like a character that has humanity, that wrestles with this thought over here, but also at the same time, they're kind of over here. They're not just one thing. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I know like my 5-year-old heart wants to be like, I want to be in a Western, like that's what I wanted. I want to be in a Western. I want to play really complex characters. I do tend to like darker characters, um, just because of the wrestle that I feel they have. But
Matt, do you
I don't know. Honestly, I'll do it.
That's good. Yeah. Do you have any stories? Because I know you've spoke to me extensively about them, but I'd love our audience to kind of hear some of the stories you've had on set, whether it's in The Walk or your new movie or any of your other work you've done, about like how you have experienced the Lord and what it is like. In effect, we talk about it, BCA, creative missionaries, creative revivalists, and creative entrepreneurs. But what's it been like for you being a believer on secular sets? Like, what have you experienced?
It's interesting because I can say as I've been on these sets, I think first and foremost as my job, I'm like, okay, my job is to protect the story. And so I go in there knowing what I have to do for the day. And I'm like, this is my job and this is what I will do. And I think but underneath that, and this is kind of like a blanket for all of what we do, especially as believers, is like service. Like having that mentality of like, I'm here to serve, and whatever that means. Like if that means like helping out the crew, that's like part of what we're supposed to do as believers. And I don't like even using that word supposed. It's like we get to. We get to go in there and serve. And as an artist, we get to serve by giving the story our whole heart. And as a human, when the camera's not rolling, we get to serve the people who are making this film, and I guess a testimony, just since you asked, this is something that God did. This was on a commercial I did for the Adventure Challenge. I was cast as this guy in this commercial, and it was kind of like a journey of this guy's life in finding love. And they didn't really give us much in regards to story, so I kind of had free reign to create my backstory. And when I did, one of the things that I kept to myself, I had a sister, and her name was Abby. And in my backstory, I'm like kind of living with my sister, and like how we're kind of like really, really close. And she's been like almost like a mother to me in a way. She's taken care of me. And we get on set, and on the second day on set, there's this woman who's been a huge impact in my life. Her name is Abby Stumval. She rolls up onto set, and and like I didn't know Abby personally, but I used to watch her talks and like kind of her message for years, and she was like a huge influence to me when I was like going through a really hard time in Mississippi. And she is now on set. The director had hired her or had brought her around to help with the actors, like to keep us just in a good state of mind. And so she's like hanging out with us, and like she's like one of my heroes. And the first thing she does, we had the scene where we're having to like throw these like bean bags full of chalk at each other, and I get hit in the face by one or something, and then we have to do a close up, so they had to wipe off the chalk. And it got all in my face and my ears. And Abby comes over and she's cleaning out my ears. And it hit me, the profound symbolism of what God was just saying to me. This person who like was such a huge influence to me is now cleaning out my ears, and how like much of a picture that was of what she did with her own message in her life when I didn't even know her. And then later on in the week, it hit me. I was like, wait, in my backstory, I created a sister who was kind of like a mother named Abby. And Abby is on the set. And it was just this really cool like moment. And I ended up telling Abby about it, like at the very, like right before our biggest scene. It was like the proposal scene. And she just starts like encouraging me. And I'm just like sitting there bawling. And it was just this crazy moment where I was like, God, you are in even meet my creation of the backstory of this commercial that I'm doing. Like you're weaving that into my history. You're so in this that I can't get you out, which is the greatest thing ever. Like it's like, because I always tried to compartmentalize him. I was like, I got to do this thing. I got to become a better actor. And like, I got my relationship with God over here. And he just, for some reason I found him, he doesn't like to be separate from what we do.
Yeah, right.
But yes, that's one of a testimony. But yeah,
and then there's another one. I love what you did. I'm not sure if you can tell me if you can share the testimony about what happened on your most recent movie.
You can leave out. I mean, if you need to leave out actors' names and stuff, or whatever.
But I mean, specifically on the walk, there was that scene with the bus. And this is how I love how Matt's all like the intensity. He gets up in his grill of the character and he's like,
yes, he does.
Super intense. But like, I love your commitment to truth. So just explain to our viewers what happened on that set.
Well, I think the moment that you're talking about, this was like a SAG, a union set. I was right out of drama school. I was just trying to do I gave it 110%. And I had this scene where my character is kind of like leading this riot. Like there's buses coming into like, into my area. And I'm like there's a big crowd, big mob, and we're like trying to get these buses out. Right. And going on to the set, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I have no idea. I'm terrified. I'm sitting there just like, it's one of those times where you're like, God, you've called me here and here I am and I've got nothing. I mean, I prepped, but I prepped the best I could as a kid right out of drama school. And God speaks to me. And it was crazy because the way he spoke to me was like, it was like a picture in my mind, and it was him on this mountain where I turkey hunt, and I love the turkey hunt. Sorry, I'm not trying to talk about turkey hunting, but I have to because I love it. And he was on this mountain where I was turkey hunting, and he looked at me and he said, my character's name was John, and he goes, John is a wild card. And I knew exactly what he meant, that he's that person that walks into the room and you don't know if they're going to like jump you, like they're going to like stab you. You're like just they don't operate by the system of like honor and things that normal people operate by. But I knew what to do with it. So I was like, when I go onto set for this riot, I am going to be a wild card, and I might scare the crew. I might scare myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to let it out.
Yeah.
And I went on that set and I was like, stuff was coming out of me. I'm like talking to this police officer while the camera's rolling. And I'm like, I didn't even know that was in me. And and like, after I did it, the director walked over to me, he shook my hand and was like, thanks, that was great. Wow. That was the first day of the riot scene. And it was a cool testimony to me, to where I was like, God's in this. And he knows these points of view, these characters that we inhabit. He knows them better than we know them. And that film was I learned so much in that experience, and it was a really great experience. And I love all the people that I worked with on that film. But yeah, that was that moment.
And didn't you get into it so much that you smashed the window of the bus and started to bleed?
Yeah, that was like that was another day that I don't know if that was like, acting experience wise. I'm like, I don't know if I do that again, because it wasn't like on camera in the way, and I don't know if it was I don't know if that was the right move, but I know in my heart that I learned something, because essentially I had the scene where this guy like essentially flips me off, and in the script it was like my character says, like, he just loses control. He goes berserk, and he's like screaming, I'm going to kill you. And the cops are like pulling him back. And I'm like, how do I get to that place? I have to let myself go to that place when this happens. And you can't like prep that. You just kind of have to go, I hope it's there and I'm going to roll with it. And so they said action, and I ran up to that bus and I threw myself at it. And I ended up going through a double pane bus window.
Jeez.
And like just shattering it. And I was like so in it. I was like ripping out glass with my hands.
Jeez.
And like eating the bus, and blood goes all over the bus. And I'm just like there's extras on the bus. And I'm looking at them and they're crying. It was one of like most looking back, I'm like, that was hilarious. I had to like get my head sewed up and I ended up doing a scene like a couple hours later, but it was like, although it might not have been right for the film per se, because I was green and I didn't need to do that. I've learned my lesson. I proved something for myself that I was like, I'll go 100%. I know I will. Like it's in me. There's the 100% thing. Like that you kind of don't really know until you get put into a situation like that. And that honestly, I still laugh about that randomly to this day. I'll think back and I'll be like, because like when the director called cut, he like leaned out from the monitor and like his face was pure shock and the whole crew was silent.
Yeah.
And everyone, like, it's one of those moments because, you know, the crew, like, you can kind of like gauge them, like, because they're, you know, they see this all the time. So a lot of times they're just kind of like not even watching the actors. But when you stop the crew, you know something real or something has just happened because the whole crew was like just frozen.
Listen, if you could stop the crew, either something went really right or something went really badly, horrifically wrong. Who knows which it is, man? We'll have to check out. You know, I think what people forget about film and film acting that's very different than theatrical acting is it's not uncommon for there to be little to no rehearsal with at least all components on set, because, you know, they're not going to fly in 100 extras in a bus for you to rehearse a scene. So, I mean, yeah, maybe you've run the dialogue and maybe stage some basic stuff, but the moment they bring it's like firing a rocket off to Mars. It's like you're only going to get, you know, 1 or 2, 3 shots of that. Specifically, if they've got to fire things or destroy things, they might be running 8 cameras in one take, and that's all you get. Specifically, if it's low budget. And I don't think people always understand what it takes to be an actor in those moments. The kind of vulnerability and risk taking that actors have to put themselves in to create these moments that we sit back comfortably on Amazon Prime and
think they're doing nothing.
Yeah. Or like Matt said earlier, where I think sometimes we think that people are lying or pretending. You know, it's very interesting to me that I actually think that often the church looks at actors and a lot of storytelling as a form of lying, which I am starting to see as a kind of religious cynicism. And I understand that they have some concerns about this, that, or the other. That's fine. But there's a whole, you know, my concern is, and we see a lot of students show up at the shores of BCA with some of these lies in their head, is that they've been told that these dreams that were on their heart go fully against, not just that it's like outside of the realm of their faith, but that it actually offends the Lord, is dirty, bad, lying. Matt, I'm curious, man, you're a boy from Mississippi who was going to finance school. And I'm not asking you to tell on your parents, but did you grow up in a home that you would, and again, this has nothing to do with your folks, it's more just like describing the culture and your upbringing, because I came from Cuban immigrants, so acting and the arts were not necessarily the number one. We were immigrant culture, go out and be a lawyer or a doctor. Describe for me the culture in your home around that.
You know, I'm the only of my family, of honestly a lot of people that I know from where I came from, I'm the only actor that I know. I mean, I can't think of anyone else. You know, I'm from the Southeast in Mississippi specifically, so there was kind of like a path that everyone had, you know, that was, you know, you go to high school, you go to college, you get married right out of college, and then you get your job, and kind of like when you have kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just, that was the path that everyone seemed to take, and I always fought that in myself. I'm like, man, I don't feel like that's me. Especially once I got to know God, I was like, he's calling me somewhere else. And I feel like I'm wrestling with this life over here and this life over here. And, but I do think acting, like, you know, that's the Bible Belt was where I grew up. And so there was definitely, it's funny too, you know, getting looks. I think even in the, you know, not even just in the religious church or even the charismatic church, there's still like a kind of like a look that you give, and like, oh, you're an actor. Like I had someone tell me, like, you know, that I had to wash off soul ties, you know, whatever that means, from like a stage kiss that I had. And I just, my personal belief is that it's acting, and that it's I felt nothing. There was nothing there. And it was just interesting the look that I got when I told someone that I had to do a stage kiss with someone, like, oh, like, you're like, you got to wash that off. Like, it's a soul tie. And I'm like, huh, interesting. That's, so yeah. I don't know if that's
sorry, I got to lean into that for a second, because now I'm just thinking about this. It's like, so then does a surgeon have a Jewish Orthodox surgeon that has blood on his hands? Is he now unclean? I don't know. Maybe he is.
Well, what about a gynecologist?
Okay, there it is.
But you know what I'm saying, right?
We're going there.
No, we are going there. I mean, we might as well go.
We have
right?
to, yeah, because I mean, it's the same thing.
It's kind of absurd thinking that is really compartmentalized.
Yeah.
Gosh, actually, I mean, I actually think you bring up a really great example. So, I mean, here's a person who's doing a service, doing their job, what they've been called to do. They've studied, I don't know, 7, 10, 15 years so that they can help people with their health.
Of course.
We would never conceive of telling that doctor performing that practice, oh, you have a soul tie because of your job. Mm-hmm. But yet in this, and here's the irony, right? We have no problem, for the most part. A lot of people, I understand some people in certain circles won't watch a lot of different things and maybe only watch certain kinds of things, and that's fine. That's their own thing. Yeah. But I love that it's okay to watch people do things. It's not okay to do it. But if you're a doctor, it's okay. But if you're an actor, you're not. And you start to see these strange lies that we tell. And I don't know if it's because out of misunderstanding. I guess, again, I'm reminded of what Sean Gaffney, the writers, that I think maybe we're in a process or a moment right now with the church, whom we all love, because we're members of the church with the capital C. We love Jesus. We love their people. But it's like, I wonder if right now, and I really feel like with Jesus Revolution, with Sean told me there are more believers in the industry today. He said, if you go to LA and you can't find another believer, it's because you're hiding under a rock. That's how big of a sea change and a shift he's seen in the industry.
Well, there are like apparently 10,000 active believers in the industry right now.
That's huge, man. I mean,
that's a lot of people.
I don't recall that being the case when I was on set before. Matt, we've only got a couple moments remaining with you, man. We got a couple questions we love to ask. If there was a young artist out there thinking about diving into the arts, maybe with a similar background, maybe not. But if there was a young artist out there thinking about taking this, but maybe concerned or afraid, what would you say to them?
I think that would depend on, what, if there was a direction they felt led to go to, felt called to. I would say, I would give. You have to try stuff, you have to try stuff or you're going to regret it. That's one of the reasons why I didn't know if I wanted to act when I first auditioned for BCA. I was like, but I know if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. And I feel like that kind of goes into a bigger thing about what life is. It's like, we have to try certain things. If we feel called to it, do it. And if you fail, that's okay. And like, you can always adjust. But to the person maybe who feels called, and who feels maybe inadequate, or who feels like this is impossible, I would say, you're right, it is. But that's where something that I've had to just lean into, which is it's the verse. It's not by strength, not by might, but by His Spirit. And I would say that has been my MO, or my thing that I've just held on to in all of this, is that, like, as believers, what we're trying to do shouldn't be like I can plot out my path. It's like, no, I'm walking out on the water with God. I'm trying to do something that is impossible. I'm not going to try to like rationalize how it could happen, because it shouldn't happen, because I'm with Him. I'm with the God of the impossible. And so I would say to let go of how you can accomplish something like as impossible of a dream as storytelling. It's but on that same note, work really hard, outwork everybody, like it's the tension here.
So, and like to any believers that, like, I know it's kind of adding on to what David says, that are even questioning whether they should or whether they shouldn't, because people feel they're going to get I don't know, tarnished by the industry or whatever, what advice would you say? Like, because what advice would you give? Because, like, you know, we always say the Lord protects you when you perform. The Lord protects you when he calls you. What advice would you say to anybody out there that's like, I want to act, but, you know, the church is saying this, my parents are saying that. What would you say to them?
I mean, I would say you answer to him, and like you to the Most High God. Like, that's who you answer to. At the same time, you have to have people looking into your life. But I would say, you know, storytelling is the most like OG original form of where God is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that. That's like he is the storyteller. He is the creator. And so I would say tarnished. Oh my gosh, I have found that this is the most fulfilling, the most life-giving, the thing that will add and not take away. Like, I really deeply believe that in my bones. Like, this journey as an artist will only add to life. It really, the only way it can take is if you're trying to, you know, be like, it's all about your ego.
Yeah, that's good.
Like that because that's your ego is all about self-preservation and self-protection. But like the artistic journey, oh my gosh, like God is all in it. And I know I could talk about that for a while, but I will say that that's the thing I keep finding as I dig underneath everything and like, well, where are you at over here? He's just there. He's always there. So that's what I would say.
If he invites you and he calls you into something, how could he not meet you in it?
Right, exactly.
Because he's waiting for you there. You know, I haven't felt this or thought this in a long time. And that has to do with my own journey. And that's why it's such a beautiful reminder to hear your story, Matt, because it's honestly, it's kind of refreshing to me. And I don't just mean refreshing and like, oh, a cool breeze. It's like life-giving and replenishing and redemptive to be reminded. There's so many things in Matt's journey that he's talked about in just the last 30, 40 minutes that not so much cautionary tale as much as it reminds me of things that I wish I would have known. Because I did so much of my journey without him, you know, and Matt had such a heads up because he was obedient to God that the Lord's been with him throughout this entire thing. His decision to go, his decision to study, his decision in his leap into the professional world, on sets, even now, navigating good moments, bad moments. And I haven't had this thought in a really long time. I don't know that I've ever had it. And that is that art is sacred, man.
Oh, completely.
Art is sacred, as sacred as those stained glass windows, as sacred as the architecture, Michelangelo, you name it. And somehow we've, in the commercialism of it, and I get it, things have to make money, and there is an ecosystem and a flywheel. I get all that, having been a producer. But I think what Matt said earlier is so, so crucial, that if we forget that the thing is sacred, it will get sullied so quickly. It reminds me of what Bill says. I love to repeat this one. Anything outside of the presence of God is demonic by nature, and that human reason is.
Absolutely.
It's like without him, when we touch a thing, it's like we can zap it of its life and its sacredness so quickly. Matt, man, it's such a pleasure to spend time with you. We're going to point people towards your films, towards your projects. It's been such a pleasure hanging out with you.
Yeah, it's been an honor, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time, brother.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much for inviting me on. It's the honor is mine, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in person soon.
Can't wait, brother. Bless you, dude.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Storia podcast. I'm David Noroña.
And I'm Fabiano Altamura.
Remember to like, follow, give us that 5-star review, and download. See you guys soon.